guys, we're here today with our competitive guide on how to use Sneasler in general whenever it comes out for any sort of competitive metagame. So if you guys enjoy this sort of guide, of course, make sure to leave a like below and subscribe for more content just like this. I'm going to be trying to cover all the Legends Arceus mods in the next videos, which I'm not sure on the dates, but they'll probably be on Thursday, probably Thursday, Saturday, and then the following Monday will probably when we do these, because I don't want to do them every day, but, you know, spacing them out a bit. We'll be covering each of the individual starter Pokemon, so if you're looking forward to those guides, of course, make sure you keep up with the channel, of course. So with that said, though, let's start with the first set for Sneasler. Actually, let's break down what Sneasler is going to be doing first. So Sneasler is going to be a Pokemon with base 130 attack and 120 speed. It is quite literally basically just pretty lateral compared to Weavile, where Weavile gets a bit more attack, and a bit more speed, I should say. Sneasler gets a bit more attack. So that's definitely pretty beneficial, of course, when comparing it. Sneasler, of course, has 10 more attack than Weavile does, but it loses out on 5 special attack, which totally matters, and then 5 more speed, which that part actually probably does matter a little bit. But 120 speed is still really good. We see, for example, in the current BDSP OU tier, that is phenomenal for a Pokemon like Alakazam, and even in just the general Sword and Shield metagame, we see for Pokemon that are around the 120 speed in this tier, we see that Zam is at least UUBL, so, you know, it's pretty high up if nothing else, just not like in the UU tier or the OU tier or anything. And then other Pokemon, I mean, to be fair, that speed tier isn't as good in Sword and Shield, but it's still not a bad speed tier nonetheless. Especially with the typing this has being Poison Fighting, there's actually a pretty obnoxious typing to switch on, and I'll get into why in a little bit. But in general, I think this will truly be where Sneasler actually shines, being just a faster Toxicroak that, while it does have a 4x weakness, to be fair, Weavile also has one anyway to Fighting, and at the very least, there's not really any Psychic priority options, or at the very least, Fighting had stuff like Mach Punch and Vacuum Wave to threaten. So I think this will actually benefit Sneasler a little bit, you know, having that 5 dip in speed. At the very least, no, it's not going to be as susceptible to priority attacks, albeit something like Extreme Speed will still definitely hurt a bit, same as, of course, Gale Wings from Talonflame, but other than that, there's not really that much priority that actually will super threaten this Pokemon. This Pokemon has some pretty lackluster placeholder abilities, sadly. The abilities are Pressure and Poison Touch, so not exactly the best, but I do actually think that unlike Weavile's abilities, I think that Poison Touch actually has a pretty good use over Pressure here, albeit you can still definitely make Pressure work, in my opinion. So with that said, let's get into our first moveset for Sneasler, which is Banded. This Pokemon will quite literally play like Weavile, but Banded actually has a nice edge over Weavile, in my opinion, being that with this moveset, you actually hit every single Pokemon that exists neutrally. The only exception, of course, would be if a Pokemon was to, let's say, change types in between turns and just barely avoid your attacks. But other than that, there's no type combination or single type that will be able to resist all 3 of these attacks. There's not a single one that currently is on any Pokemon. So with that said, of course, you do have this. And one advantage to the Banded Weavile, the Banded Sneasler, I'm gonna keep calling this Weavile, by the way, but the Banded Sneasler, of course, has the really nice way of boosting all of your attacks without making you take any recoil damage from something like a Life Orb. So it's just a nice immediate breaker, especially with that base 10 extra attack at 130 total. This is going to definitely help Sneasler a lot. We see that Weavile already makes use of Banded sets pretty well with the Dark Ice typing, and then usually throwing on like a low kick or some moves like that to make some pretty nice damage in OU. And I think Sneasler could do the same. If we look at, let's say, Sword and Shield OU, for example, this moveset, we have fighting type attacks, which would be really good for Pokemon like Ferrothorn and Heatran and Kartana. And we'd have poison type attacks, which would be great for Clefable, which is one of the best fairies in the tier, as well as Pokemon like all the Tapus, especially stuff like Tapu Fini and Lele, which unless the Lele is Scarf, it would be slower, and Fini, of course, would definitely be slower because you don't really see Scarf Fini these days unless it's tricking it away, and even still, Fini wouldn't be able to necessarily really run Scarf successfully, and it couldn't switch it anyway. In terms of other Pokemon, probably one of the best switches to this would probably be like a Buzzwole in the tier. However, at the very least, one move that you could potentially throw on this Pokemon that Sneasler does actually get, which could help a little bit, would be Aerial Ace. Now, I'm not saying that Aerial Ace would probably be like a make or break, but if your team is really weak to Buzzwole, and to be fair, it does have metas where it does pop up, this might be a move to at least consider, because if we take just standard Fizz Def Buzzwole, let's say, and we throw on Aerial Ace from this Pokemon with a 130 attack and a choice band, you're doing guaranteed at least 58% just a standard Fizz Def Buzzwole. And even if it's max, you're actually guaranteeing to 2 KO after leftovers. So it definitely couldn't switch if you got the prediction right at the very least, because it would be punished for that. So you do have options like that in its moveset, which is pretty useful in my opinion. Other good moves you have that are left off of here that you could throw on a Banded set would be stuff like X-Scissor and Iron Tail, but I think these are pretty lackluster in comparison. In terms of other physical moves, everything else is pretty much just worse than all of those. Like, it's really not even worth considering. Stuff like Rock Smash, False Swipe. However, this will probably get a move like Psycho Cut, so that could also be worth considering depending on what your moveset is trying to hit. However, I think ultimately this combination of 4 moves, being Shadow Claw, Drain Punch, Close Combat, and Poison Jab, is probably the best. But if I was to take off something, it would probably be Drain Punch for Aerial Ace, and it really would depend on the team composition, in my opinion. Now let's get into the next set, which is going to be Sword Stance. This is a Sword Stance Sneasler with Life Orb. This has Sword Stance, Shadow Claw, Poison Jab, and Drain Punch. That Drain Punch could also just as easily be Close Combat. I threw on Drain Punch mostly just to not get the defense drops, because if you're running a Life Orb set and you're already taking damage, you don't want to be more susceptible with priority than you already will be by taking 10% every turn. With this set as well, so your stats would put you at base 80 for HP. So actually, this also gained some HP. So it lost 5 in each defense, which actually, that base 80 HP is pretty incredible. To put it in perspective, if we were to take another base 80 HP Pokemon, and we were just calculating this flat HP value, this would put it at 301. So actually, what we'll want to do is we'll want to make this 29 IVs as well. That is something I forgot to account for, but with Life Orb, you want to make this 29 IVs. So if you're listening and you just click off when you saw the set and then move on, keep that in mind. This is a bonus for you guys who are helping my watch time. 29 IVs is what you want to go for in that HP stat. This will help you take less damage from Life Orb. To put in perspective why it makes a difference, Life Orb takes 10% of your HP every turn. So with the perfect IV set, you're actually taking 30 Life Orb damage every turn, whereas the 29 HP IVs, you would only be taking 29. So this means after 10 Life Orb uses, you'll have 1 HP if you have the perfect IV set, whereas with the 29 IVs, you'll be having 9 HP left over. So it's a very small difference, but that could make or break once you get down to like a 30, like the 30 HP, the 30% HP or the 40% HP, where you're having that 9 HP left versus 1 HP left. Because it's a small amount of difference, but it mostly is for priority users, in my opinion. So regardless though, with this moveset, again, it's perfect coverage, and unlike with the Bandit set, you're not locking into something. Because for example, if you were to, let's say, lock into a Bandit Close Combat or a Bandit Poison Jab, Aegis Slash and Lander T are both very free switching to that, as well as Buzzwole, and you're just hard locked into those moves. Whereas with the Sword Dance set at the very least, you're able to actually punish those switch-ins pretty well. Because if you get the Sword Dance up on the double, Lander T would probably still take a hit, well, to be fair. In fact, we can actually make that calc right now. So Lander is Therian with the defensive set, just standard defensive Lander T getting Intimidate off. If you are +2, with, let's say, Poison Jab would probably be your best way, you would do 21%, which is pretty negligible. With Shadow Claw, you'd be doing around 30%, like 37%, and Close Combat would be doing around 30. Well, actually, this is forgetting Stat Boost. I'm calculating off of Weavile right now, so sorry about that. But if we were to take, let's say, the fighting typing, Weavile actually does around 48% minimum, just a standard defensive Lander T with Close Combat, and then Drain Punch and Poison Jab is 32%. Drain Punch would do even less than that, but the Poison Jab, what that has the advantage of doing is fishing with the poison. With that plus Poison Touch, it's a pretty high chance of getting that poison there. And also, if it's a defensive Landorus, at the same time, you're getting a second hit off. So if you were to, let's say, get a poison off with Close Combat, you're able to actually beat it 1v1 guaranteed, because it wouldn't even beat you at that point, because you would have the +1 attack still. And then you're getting Close Combat off, doing 48% minimum to standard defensive. Then it's taking 12% for poison, gaining 6% from leftovers. So that's 54% HP it's taken minimum, and you do 46%. I know, 48%. So it would only have 46 left over, so you would kill it by 2% extra. Landorus could obviously maybe throw in a bit more HP to do that, but it would still be really good. Pokemon like a Powder and Buzzwole will be really threatening to this, but of course you could pair this with, let's say, a good Flying type or a good Water type. Something like a Rotom Wash would actually be a phenomenal partner for this, because it could potentially burn Buzzwole. It's a special attacker, so it doesn't worry about Buzzwole's Fizz Def walling, and it would also be a really good pivot to bring this in. It's a really good pivot in general in the tier. Other Pokemon that could be really nice with this actually would be stuff like Finny, because Finny is able to take just general really good bulk. It's able to handle stuff like a Powder and Buzzwole really well with super effective stabs for both. And it's able to handle a lot of the faster Pokemon on the tier that would maybe just outpace and revenge off Sneasler without a Scarf. So that is going to be our team for today. Well, our moveset guides for today, I should say. Hopefully you guys enjoy this sort of content, and if you did, leave a like below. Shoutouts to our channel members, of course, being Zeke Zero, Josh aka Ultra Player, Mia, Rika Hashizora, and Randy Chappa. You guys help keep the channel afloat, and I really appreciate you guys. With that said, let's see you guys in the Wednesday's video where we'll be covering the next starter Pokemon, which you guys should comment down below for what starter you want to see next. Until then, though, peace out, guys.